All right.
I'm here. I'm looking at the thing. I have it all printed, but
I'm ready to go.
Madam Chair, we're pleased to be here today.
this committee is in session.
Moving right along.
I
not
don't
being
actually have a
taped, is it?
copy of the agenda in front of me here, but do we have legislative updates first, or do we have just platform on the agenda?
Boy,
Okay.
I don't remember.
That's all right. We'll start with legislative updates real quick. And Rusty, you're going to help me on this a little bit. The good news is that we are actually seeing some movement on the critical shortage list. This legislation that's been part of your platform, they did some hearings in the Senate.
They just posted it again for Tuesday.
And just posted it again. So it looks like we may get it out of the committee and onto the Senate floor. And what do you think? Do you think there's more movement? Does this have legs to go the distance?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. Teacher eval, we're still working with that. The House.
It's been posted for tomorrow.
That's posted for tomorrow. Okay. You want to go ahead?
So it's just, they posted it exactly 18 hours, what they need to. That was Winnie.
Oh.
So she hasn't seen the latest version of the bill. I know Chris is trying to track it down right now. My understanding is we've been comfortable with this sort of all along because it meets our criteria, which is don't mess with what we do and keep student growth in a reasonable
below 50%.
Percentage, below 50%. My understanding is the new version, the H6, puts it at 40%, which we liked. We were supportive of it when it was that in the
Moving in the right direction.
So it's at 40%, and then it's 50-50 state evaluation,
Local assessment. Yep.
So I think we should be fine with that as well.
Yep.
So that's supposed to be up tomorrow. Whether or not, it's not drastically different than when it came out of the Senate. I think they can get there. Critical shortage is coming. I put 491 on your, I gave you a copy. This is alt certification. And basically what this would do, Pablo is running this one as well. I'd like to be able to support it if we can. But it basically says if you are in the areas of all the areas that it talks about here, but then they add in writing, journalism, health sciences, and in a discipline included on the critical shortage discipline, you can then use teachers that aren't certified but have an appropriate level of education to be able to teach if the district so chooses to use them. It doesn't require it, but it just gives you that flexibility to do it. And then requires that once you hire that teacher, they have 7 years to get their certification. So, it's not necessarily something we have to take a position on, but I just wanted to present it to you.
Yeah, I have reservations on things that aren't on the critical shortage for, is it only critical shortage list?
No.
Yeah, so I have reservations. I would want a further discussion about that.
Well, let's
Okay.
look at it and keep talking about it, but that's on the agenda
Right.
along with,
Yeah, okay.
it's on the agenda along with.
Back with the teacher eval, so would this usurp the former legislation that required, remember, my memory serves me correctly, it was like, it was supposed to incrementally increase, it was part of the race to the top, the value add part, so.
But this year, it would have gone to 50%.
Right, so this legislation would,
Dial it back.
yeah, okay, so then
And
that.
provide for more local flexibility for us to use our own evaluation system.
Okay,
So they
good.
listened.
Good.
Third grade reading?
Third grade reading is out of committee. We were essentially comfortable with it, but we're hoping to see if we could get another year delay on the implementation. Right now,
Yeah.
it would be 17-18. I basically went into Amanda Price's office and said, give us 18-19 and you'll have our support all the way through with no more changes. And so she said, I want to get it out of committee. I keep having to give up stuff. I want to get it out of committee, but I want to keep talking. So we said, no, we completely understand. We didn't put a card in. I said, I'm going to hold off. And then we've gone around with, Chris and I have gone around and talked to most of the West Michigan members about going to Amanda to say we support an additional year of implementation. I think she didn't want to do another year in committee because then she might get pushed to do another year
on the floor.
So
Right.
I get it from a negotiating standpoint, what she's trying to do. I feel
So
pretty,
has there been unanimity in, like, the West Michigan group on asking for another year, or?
Part of the talent triangle.
Most are
Yes.
supportive. Most of are supportive. I mean, I had lunch with Ken Yonker, and he's like, "I'm all about it. We need that extra year." Met with Chris Affandoulis today. He's all about the other year.
Good.
They're all willing to go and talk to Amanda about it. So I have a real high degree of comfort that we'll get that extra year on the retention. So
I was actually asking from the other end, from a lobbying standpoint, was there,
Are the other
Was there a solid-
education advocacy
Yeah.
groups getting behind it?
or even,
West Michigan Talent Triangle and Grand Rapids Public Schools.
I would say we're farther out there than
to support it?
most.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of the groups, a lot of the school groups are taking the angle of no retention ever for no reason.
Okay. So,
So,
but in terms of pushing back on the current draft of the legislation, was there unanimity of asking, we need another year before we can support it?
From lobbying side,
Yeah.
West Michigan?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, that was,
Chris and I are doing all of our meetings together.
okay.
And talking about this and talking about, just, obviously, we were in
Eval.
support of what they were trying to do when they came out with the third grade reading. But they needed to be understanding of this need, especially in urban districts. That was a unique perspective. And so, like I said, there was a strong desire to listen. I think it was just a matter of the dynamics of when you give and when you don't.
How does that work with Chris and all those districts? Is it just the ISD superintendency has to sign on, or is it the
So,
districts
I
within
can
each
answer
of the
that.
ISDs?
I was going to, I was just, so for those that might be watching this, and the West Michigan Talent Triangle includes the entire Kent ISD, Muskegon ISD, Ottawa ISD, and all public school districts underneath it that have signed on to it. So in essence, the Talent Triangle, along with Grand Rapids Public Schools, we are getting behind this with these changes. And so you do have a pretty large education advocacy from the West Michigan contingency. As
And there's a subcommittee, isn't there?
there is a committee there is an actual formal process where the ISDs each get certain appointments, and there's certain seats that are reserved. Teresa is on there, so we have a seat. I don't have it right offhand. I think it's 7 or maybe it's 6 people that are on there. When Chris, maybe at the next meeting, we can have him talk more about that structure. But the idea behind that was to try to elevate our advocacy so that we're speaking with one voice and have the greatest influence in Lansing. And this is also aligning with the Talent 2025, where the business community and the Talent Triangle and GRPS, our platforms are aligning significantly. And so we expect that will help strengthen our advocacy efforts. Is one of the reasons why we have a seat at the table while they're coming to us saying, we want to know where you're at. We've also been willing to step out on a few things a little bit more than others, but that's been a part of our advocacy strategy, and it's also why we've started to see some results.
So lots of stuff.
Yeah.
No shortage of fun.
Yeah.
We did hear about potential sinking fund legislation move.
That's another great point. There was Amanda Price, the chair, has said that when she gets third grade reading done, and then she's going to work on eval and sinking funds next. So now, what chance that has in the Senate is yet to be seen. Chairman there doesn't necessarily show his hand, so we'll sort of see where we go. But at least we get some momentum and some movement. So lots going on.
Yeah. Thanks.
Shall we shift to the legislative platform?
Sure.
Okay.
You good?
Yep.
As I shared in the email, this platform is nearly identical to what it was last year. The main changes to it, and we'll walk through it one by one, but the main changes to it, we updated a small portion under the third grade reading, and I'll talk about that in a second. We updated the categorical funding just to show what we got, that we did. We also said thank you for the increase in 31A and acknowledged that we'd like to continue that. And then I did add the jury selection, which former Commissioner Mayhew had brought forth, and I added the teacher evaluation. That's brand new. We've talked about it, but we never had an actual necessarily formal written position in this paper. And so if it's okay, I'll walk through it right now. The guiding principles are identical. We are aligned with the Talent Triangle, Talent 2025, the KISD. We want Michigan to be a top 10 state. There is no one-size-fits-all approach to education. The laws and the funding should reflect that. That we should maintain local democratic control. That there should be financial structure that is consistent, adequate, fair, and equitable funding to meet the needs of all children. It should be based on the needs of students. That new and future federal or state mandates should have appropriate revenue to go along with them, and that the fiscal impact of the school aid fund and the state retirement system should be a significant factor when we're looking at any legislation. That's exactly what it was last year. So our top legislative priorities, the sinking fund technology expansion. This is, again, simply updating the sinking fund law so that we could spend those dollars on technology. It makes more sense to use an operating millage as opposed to bonding for technology over 25 years. So you're paying for a computer that's functionally obsolete in 3 to 5 years, and we're paying for it over 25. Third grade reading, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on here. This is the same position as we had before, that we would support legislation as long as there is a dedicated and increased investment in the intervention strategies, that the standardized test must be clearly established and consistent, that retention is an absolute last resort, and there must be good cause exemptions, and we list the alternative assessments, that there should be a phased-in approach. That's what we just talked about, that this should be a phased-in over 3 years. That gives time
and
for
this is what we had always, didn't we?
This is verbatim.
So
I think the only, maybe
should be no surprises that we're
this is, nope.
pushing back on the current draft.
Absolutely verbatim.
We've always been there with it.
The school calendar reforms, again, you remember this goes back to essentially an unfunded mandate. They're mandating that we add days, yet we're now it's punted back to the locals to then go and negotiate it when, now we're adding days, and of course, as you can imagine, our employees are saying, well, we should be paid for those days, and yet we're not getting additional funding to go along with that. It's also important to note that we'll be going up to 180 days next school year, and that's a jump from 175, and so that's a substantial. It's one thing to negotiate 1 day addition like we did last year.
Holy
this is a
cow.
5-day jump.
That's going to be,
I didn't realize that.
wow.
The next part was expanding the tenure reform to include the ancillary and itinerant support staff. This was added last year, and again, this is recognizing that many of these are educational support staff, yet they're still based on the old tenured system, not on the new effectiveness evaluation system for teachers and administrators. The next one is retirement reform that we support, continuing to look at how we can strengthen and improve the sustainability and long-term viability of our state retirement system. The School Aid Act rewrite, this is where we talk about the needs-based funding. Go ahead.
Well, I just wondered with this suggestion, you referenced the Oxford thing, and that's a little dated, and I got forwarded Tim Kelly's white paper on responding to Detroit Public Schools, and it's got that voucher type. It's like the recommendations, very much like the Oxford report. So it might be able to, you could reference that in there too, if that's being talked about or floated out there.
I left the Oxford stuff because, and I think we've kind of intentionally done this with a few of these positions, we have to remind these lawmakers that even though this thing's getting dusty on a shelf now, it's still a document that was out there, and that many of these lawmakers, especially the new ones, won't know about it, but some of the old ones will.
Yeah.
And again, you'll see, the good news is we were successful, thanks to Representative Brandon Dillon, in getting funding for a cost study of education. We are going to continue to try to influence that, but again, we need to look at the true cost of educating. And the good news is our friends at Talent 2025 appear to be adopting a similar position, and we're very excited about that. charter school transparency, accountability, reform. There's kind of a growing movement right now. This may not be as much legislatively as it is through the Michigan Department of Education at this point, where again looking at how we can have greater accountability, transparency that goes along with our friends in the charter school community.
I just want to ask, just going back to the school funding, just
Yep.
because I got this thing from Tim Kelly, does it have any legs for Detroit Public School to do more of a Oxford type approach? Do you know anything about it, or?
There's a ton of stuff swirling around in Detroit.
Detroit, okay.
What's going on? They essentially want to take the equivalent of $75 a kid for every district across the state to pay off the debt in DPS.
Yeah, I know that part of
So there's
it.
a challenge on
Yeah.
that side of it. Then Mayor Duggan wants to use schools as a way to revitalize neighborhoods, which totally makes sense, but wants to have a common enrollment, essentially wants to get control of the charter schools.
Yeah.
You can imagine how successful that's being.
Yeah.
So you have that. Then you
The-
have just sort of, the DPS challenge that's just sort of inherent there, and it's what's going on there. I don't know how they solve it.
Yeah, no, I don't know how they solve it either. I guess I'm just, as a matter of precedence, to see that kind of voucher, for-profit, anytime, anywhere concept reappear, like it was in the Oxford, to see it reappear in Representative Kelly's suggestion for Detroit Public Schools. I'm wondering, is that just a dated thing, or is it something that's still alive and well and could be embraced?
I think from their perspective, it is in such disarray, they're willing to try anything.
Yeah.
I don't know that translates to having people look at it everywhere else, but as soon as you have a distressed school district, let's say they did it and.
Yeah, I would hate to see it as a precedent, you know.
Yep, agreed.
Well, and then in addition to that, you had the coalition from the Detroit Schools Coalition, Skillman Foundation, United Way, a bipartisan group that made recommendations. The governor came out with his own recommendations. You have the Paul Pastorek with the portfolio schools management, probably a little bit of what Tim Kelly's talking about. So we're going to continue to monitor that. You'll see, notably, we have not put anything in here. At some point, we may need to come, because part of this is how do we, is there a way, if at all, for us to show support for our friends in Detroit? That the kids in Detroit city proper, they deserve a stable, strong, and growing public school system like we have.
But they don't necessarily have a school board
Right.
that has the same will to make changes that this one has.
Right.
Over the last number of years.
Right.
That's part of the push and pull too.
Yeah, and that's why I think that's one where we look at it is, we've been optimistic about some of the things happening. Mayor Dugan, Teresa's been down and met with the mayor and met with the DPS team. They had a team come here, have been studying what we've been doing. So I think we're going to do what we can, obviously behind the scenes, and then once, if and when something moves, we'll come back to you with more information.
Okay.
Full permanent itinerant funding. This is the situation, well, this is where, we're not treated like every other district because ISDs typically get a 28% reimbursement for their special ed itinerant costs. Instead, we get lapsed dollars. When we were in the last budget round, Rusty, as I recall, there was some talk about us providing them with an amendment to fix this once and for all. Anything else you want to add on that?
Nope, I think if we can get that in, the timing is probably in the next
Soon.
6 to 8 weeks.
Yeah. So we were
capped.
we are capped now at a certain amount. So it actually, in essence, was a cut. It's that we're not going to get as much as we could potentially. But we now have Dave Hildenbrand as chair of Senator Probst. We had a Senator Probst subcommittee chair who basically said, get me an amendment that fixes this once and for all so they don't have to keep hearing Rusty over and over again.
Like my banjo play something else.
Restoration, preservation of categorical funding. We maintained everything here because we think it's important to show how high needs, high poverty districts were in fact disproportionately cut in the midst of the Great Recession. And the good news is if you look at the bottom of it, we point out what the per pupil foundation allowance increase was, but we also show that there was a $104 per pupil 31A increase. They maintained the bilingual, and there was a slight cut, or really a cap, if you will, on special ed itinerant funding. You'll see we also added language in the paragraph at the top that says we commend the governor and legislature for the smart strategic investment increase in 31A funding and encourage that this commitment remain.
We'll have to keep on them on that one.
That's
the challenge that we have with them doing roads, and how much is new money and how much is existing money, and all those challenges that come in.
You'll see at the bottom there we talk about maintaining, restoring, and expanding bilingual. These are maintaining, reforming categorical reimbursements for the special ed itinerant, a new categorical on 31A, which is essentially what they did. So you're seeing parts of your platform getting checked off, or certainly getting action in Lansing. Critical shortage list, we already talked about this, but for those that are watching, right now there are a number of positions that are hard to fill positions. ESL, ELL, special ed, math, science being the most notable. Nearly 2 years ago, the law that allowed us to use retired teachers and administrators expired. And now we've been operating without the ability to bring in that veteran talent when we need it in a temporary or even somewhat long-term basis, depending on the need. And we are pleased that the Senate is starting to take action, and that we may see some movement on this. Educator evaluate. This is new. But we've talked about it a little bit. This is where we put language that says we join with the Talent Triangle in supporting these legislative efforts to strengthen and improve the educator evaluation system, with particular emphasis on 1, providing more flexibility for districts to pick or develop their high-quality evaluation observation tools, reducing the student growth component from 50% and phasing in the growth percentages. You'll note that I did not put on there reducing it from 50 to 40, because it's actually possible it could be less than that, and ultimately would actually advocate for that. We believe that the classroom observations and the training of those evaluators is where this focus needs to be, and that we're finding that the classroom evaluations are observations are by far the most predictive of effectiveness, not just one-size-fits-all test scores. Increasing the percent, and then also increasing the percentage of the local assessment weight. That local assessment weight, again, we're getting more timely and accurate picture of student growth. This is in our case, it's the MAP test mostly. So we're hitting them 3 times. We know where they're at. We know where their growth targets are. We know what their RIT scores are, and we can help challenge the children that way. Next one is reforming timing. This is just keeping that language that says, far too frequently are we getting where MDE or the federal government are issuing mandates and edicts and things without the appropriate funding, without appropriate timing, where we have a patchwork of different rules, regulations that are constantly changing. And so it's like we start down one way, and then a week later they say, nope, stop and go back to this. And that's something that we need to see change. The other issues, early childhood.
All the same?
All of these are the same. Early childhood, and if you want me to go into depth on them, let me know.
No.
Reforming the top to bottom list formula. After-school programming, standardized testing dates, Common Core, the EAA codification, banning open carry in schools.
Let me just stop right there.
Yep.
Senator Meekhoff has said that he has to be careful among his constituencies about how he says these kinds of things, but open carry doesn't make any sense in schools. However, banning anything in schools is highly unlikely in this particular legislature, so I think he's going to be looking at concealed weapon.
Instead of open carry, it could be permitted concealed carry.
Permitted concealed, but you couldn't have open carry. So.
No comment.
I was going to say,
Whatever.
Not necessary, I just want
It's
to.
just simply sharing information. So, restoring that dedicated school aid funding. Actually, you know what? I need to update this. I'm looking at some language there. There's probably a few things on here that I need to update to add that they did in fact use the 2X formula this year.
Yeah.
But that we're still below those 2006 levels, or 2007 levels. Consolidation of services, teacher administrator compensation. This is still relevant for about part of the year, but that House Bill 4625 is probably, I'm assuming that we'll want to maybe update this just ever so slightly so it's not referencing a specific bill.
Old stuff, yeah.
Yep. But this is, I mean, again, it's still out there.
Yeah.
It's not that.
Yeah.
The issue is.
Teacher effectiveness and parent notification, school choice, all-day kindergarten, unfunded mandates, school board elections, expanded dual enrollment, shared time, PPT replacement. Even though they've already done this, we still think it's important to keep this in here as to what our expectations, what your expectations were when they eliminated the personal property tax. Union dues, anti-billing, flexibility for vocation ed, exempt for Headley rollback, and then here's the new one, jury selection. And this just says that Grand Rapids Board of Education supports legislative efforts to reform the jury selection process to ensure juries are more diverse and representative of the community. This includes, but is not limited to, providing counties with the names and addresses of taxpayers, utilizing zip codes for geographic balance, and not limiting the jury pool to just individuals with driver's licenses or state ID cards.
Great.
And then the rest is all the same federal ESEA stuff for the last, 10 years. And with that said, we normally wouldn't be pushing as early, but because our legislative lunch is a little sooner than we normally do it for specific purposes, in part because of the bond, but also because of some legislative things happening this fall. We would love to ask the committee for their support and a recommendation to the Board of Education for their vote this Monday.
I can support. I don't know how it works with just two of us.
Aye.
Yeah, let's move it forward.
Okay, good.
If you're
Thank
good, I'm good, Mo.
I'm good. Looks good.
Yeah. Thank you, gentlemen.
Just keep on going on. You really still enjoy this work, huh?
It's great. Doesn't ever get old.
No.
Learn something new.
Got the Chamber's endorsement today.
Very good. Congratulations.
Awesome.
It's a big one.
Very nice. Important one.
Thanks.
Anything else we have?
Those are great.
No.
Cool.